Today, we're going to dive into the story of a king whose devotion was absolutely legendary, but whose death, well, it was a shocking and, honestly, a seemingly senseless tragedy. This is the story of King Josiah, a man who reached the absolute pinnacle of faith, only to fall in a battle he had no reason to fight.
And that right there is the central puzzle we're exploring. Imagine this. Josiah reaches the absolute peak of his spiritual leadership. He's overseeing a festival on a scale nobody has seen. So why was his life cut short, just moments later, in a battle he seemingly had no reason to fight? It's this massive, dramatic reversal of fortune that we really need to try and understand.
Okay, so let's dive into this. To really get it, we first have to understand the incredible high point of Josiah's reign. See, this wasn't just any king. He was a man on a mission to restore sacred traditions and bring his people back to this profound state of devotion.
So who was this King Josiah? Well, the sources basically paint him as one of the most righteous kings in the entire history of Judah. His whole reign was defined by these huge religious reforms, clearing out improper forms of worship and completely refocusing the nation's spiritual life on the temple in Jerusalem.
And you can really see Josiah's hands-on approach here. He wasn't some distant ruler just handing down orders. No, he was deep in the details, appointing priests, telling the Levites exactly where the sacred ark should go, and making sure every single step followed these ancient sacred instructions. He was both a king and the master organizer for this historic event.
So all of this super meticulous planning, it led to an event that was, frankly, unlike any other. The sheer scale of this Passover celebration is just hard to wrap your head around, and it all started with the king's own incredible generosity.
To kick things off, Josiah himself donated 30,000 lambs and young goats. And get this wasn't from the state treasury. The text is very clear. This was from the king's own possessions. It was a massive personal gift to make sure every single person could participate.
But he didn't stop there. On top of all those smaller animals, he also gave 3,000 cattle. Again, all from his personal holdings. That level of personal investment from a monarch for a religious festival it was staggering.
And you can see the ripple effect of his leadership right here on this chart. Inspired by his example, the temple officials and the Levite leaders also pitched in with thousands of their own animals. Josiah created this culture of generosity that just flowed down through the entire leadership.
So the crucial point is summed up right here. This wasn't just a big party. The source material is clear. No king, no leader had ever hosted a Passover of this magnitude, with this level of devotion going back centuries to the time of the prophet Samuel. This was the absolute spiritual pinnacle of a nation, led by its most pious king.
Now, you would think a story like this would end with a long, peaceful reign, right? And he lived happily ever after. But it doesn't. In a really shocking turn of events, right after this incredible celebration, Josiah's story takes a sudden and violent nosedive. And here's what happens. King Necho of Egypt is just passing through. He's on his way to fight a battle way up at Carchemish, a fight that has absolutely nothing to do with Josiah or the kingdom of Judah. Yet, for reasons the historical account never really explains, Josiah decides to march his army out and get in his way.
Necho is so confused by this that he sends messengers with a direct warning. He basically says, hey, my fight isn't with you. I'm on a mission from God, and he told me to hurry. If you get in my way, you're not opposing me, you're opposing God. What a stunning message, especially coming from a foreign king.
So this is it. This is the tragic choice laid bare. On one side, you've got a crystal clear warning to stand down, and on the other, Josiah's just completely defiant. He refuses to listen. He refuses to turn back. He even disguises himself, which is a tactic you use to avoid being a main target. It suggests he knows this is a risky fight, but he is determined to see it through anyway.
And that single, defiant decision leads directly to one of the most abrupt and tragic ends for any monarch in the historical record. The whole thing happens so fast. The battle in the plain of Megiddo is swift and it is brutal. Despite his disguise, King Josiah is struck by Egyptian archers. He's critically wounded, and he just utters the simple, desperate plea, "Take me away." His officers manage to get him into another chariot and race him back to Jerusalem, but it's too late. The great king dies in his own capital city.
The king's death was a national trauma. The
The entire kingdom mourned him. I mean, the prophet Jeremiah himself wrote laments for Josiah, and they became so significant that they were sung for generations, cementing his memory as this beloved, fallen leader.
So this brings us right back to the central puzzle. We've seen his incredible devotion, and we've seen his shocking end. How do we reconcile the two sides of this remarkable and ultimately tragic figure?
This is the paradox of King Josiah laid out right here. On one hand, you have the devoted reformer who achieved a spiritual height that no other king had reached. On the other, you have a man who, in his final moments, ignored a divine warning and died in a seemingly pointless conflict. It's this clash between wisdom and folly, piety and maybe pride.
And so we're left with a question, aren't we? Was his death a tragic miscalculation, a fatal overestimation of his own strength, or was it some kind of final and failed test of his faith? The sources don't give us an easy answer, but the story of King Josiah serves as this powerful reminder that even the most devout can be undone by a single moment of defiance.